I've recently read 3 books, all of which I'm glad I read, and all of which have the same fatal flaw. They're all constructed around a faulty premise. A Poison Like No Other, How Microplastics Corrupted Our Planet and Our Bodies, by Matt Simon, is a book about the absolutely catastrophic impacts of plastic. The book describes how micro and nanoplastics are everywhere. They're in the air we breathe, in the water we drink, in the food we eat, in the soil, our bodies, in our brains, blood, lungs, placentas, fetuses, testicles. Everywhere researchers have looked, they've found plastic. In the bodies of every living being on the planet, including plants. These microplastics are leaking CO2, contributing to climate change, leaking toxics, poisoning us and all living beings who ingest these plastics, clogging our veins, our lungs, our brains. The book's fatal flaw? That we need plastic in order to maintain this ecocidal way of life, and so we must mitigate for the harms of plastic rather than eliminate plastic entirely. Crossings, How Road Ecology is Shaping the Future of Our Planet, by Ben Goldfarb, is a book about the absolutely catastrophic impacts of roads. The book describes the mass killing, perhaps more aptly described as murder, of wildlife and humans the world's 40 million miles of roads perpetrate on a daily basis. The habitat fragmentation, the pollution, the noise, the isolation that roads cause, no matter what is driven on them. It is an entire book about the nightmare that is roads for all living beings on the planet. The book's fatal flaw? That we need roads in order to maintain this ecocidal way of life, and so we must mitigate for the harms of roads rather than eliminate roads entirely. Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives, by Siddharth Kara, is a book about the absolutely catastrophic impacts of mining, particularly cobalt, but also copper, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC. The book describes in devastating detail the destitution of the lives destroyed by cobalt mining, the drudgery, slavery, pollution, health impacts, environmental ruination, the horrors that one can barely believe but are real, all to supply materials for our tech gadgets and electric vehicles. The book's fatal flaw? That we need this technology in order to maintain this ecocidal way of life, and so we must mitigate for the harms caused by mining rather than eliminate mining entirely. In each case, the author has written a book describing why plastic, roads, and mining are untenable for a future of life on planet Earth. In each case, the author excuses and rationalizes the very thing he's written an entire book explaining why they cannot be excused, cannot be rationalized. It is truly astonishing. In A Poison Like No Other, Simon writes, "Plastics aren't going anywhere. They're just too useful and too omnipresent. And even if a virus killed every human next week, our plastic would still decay and flush out to sea and take to the air until one day, a long time from now, it will all have decomposed as far as it can go, wrapping the planet in a perpetual nanoplastic haze. But there are ways to at least thin that haze by slowing the emission of plastics of all sizes." In one paragraph, Simon manages to explain why any new plastic added to the plastic already in the environment is a disaster, and simultaneously suggest that we can somehow reduce the impacts by slowing the emission of plastics. No, all new plastic added to the existing plastic in the world will add to the haze. Slowing the emission of plastics is better than not slowing it, but Simon's book lays out a compelling case for why we need to entirely eliminate plastic, and then he concludes that we should slow emissions of plastic, thus compounding the plastic pollution, just a bit more slowly. This is like the people who think that by slowing CO2 emissions we can mitigate climate change. No, CO2 emissions are cumulative, like plastic in the environment is cumulative. Anything but zero emissions makes the problem worse. Slow is better than fast, but zero is the only acceptable answer to how much plastic should we continue to make, just like zero is the only acceptable answer to how much CO2 is acceptable to emit from burning fossil fuels and destroying the land. Zero. Simon notes that in the grand scheme of human existence, it wasn't that long ago that we got along just fine without plastic. He's so close to seeing that we could exist without plastic again. And then he ruins it by saying, there's a path in which we rein in single-use packaging, fix the busted economics of recycling, and get a microfiber filter in every washing machine. Reining in single-use plastics? Get a microfiber filter on every washing machine? Sure, that's better than nothing, but will do little in the big scheme of things. Recycling, we now know, is a farce. It is downcycling, not recycling, and it essentially turns macroplastic into micro and nanoplastic at incredible rates. New research shows recycling may actually be the #1 source of microplastic, greater even than clothes and tires, which were the #1 and 2 sources when Simon wrote his book. Using less plastic would be great. And the only conclusion a sane person can draw after reading Simon's book is that zero plastic is what we should be aiming for. Anything more than zero is not acceptable. In Crossings, Goldfarb writes, "A thing is right," Aldo Leopold famously wrote in his Call for a Land Ethic, "when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. By that standard, roads are the wrongest things imaginable, agents of chaos that shatter biotic integrity wherever they intrude." Like Simon, Goldfarb is so close to seeing that roads are so wrong that we could and should eliminate them. The future will be small, local, and low-tech. It has to be, because large, global, and high-tech has pushed us into catastrophic ecological overshoot, is entirely dependent on fossil fuels, and is destroying the biosphere. That way of life cannot last. So the roads we've built as part of a large, global, and high-tech way of life will soon become mostly useless. There are 40 million miles of roads on Earth today, and as Goldfarb writes, more than 25 million miles of new road lanes will be built worldwide by 2050, many through the world's remaining intact habitats, a concrete wave that the ecologist William Lawrence has described as an infrastructure tsunami. The existing roads are a catastrophe. Building more roads will only compound that catastrophe. The author writes, "The allure of the car is so strong that it has persuaded Americans to treat 40,000 human lives as expendable each year. What chance does wildlife have?" A half-century ago, just 3% of land-dwelling mammals met their end on a road. By 2017, the toll had quadrupled. It has never been more dangerous to set paw, hoof, or scaly belly on the highway. More birds die on American roads every week than were slain by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. How can someone write these words and conclude anything but that roads must be eliminated? And yet, somehow Goldfarb then writes that we need a road ethic and waxes lyrical about a tiny number of wildlife over- and underpasses existing and planned that, yes, are better than doing nothing, but will do very little to stop the slaughter of living beings on roads, and absolutely nothing to stop the 25 million new miles of roads planned through some of the world's last remaining intact habitats. Cars are terrible for the environment, no matter what powers them. The roads they are driven on are terrible for the environment. Goldfarb's book makes this crystal clear. How does he not conclude that we need to eliminate roads? It's so obvious we must. Humans have been driving cars for only about 135 years. Obviously, we drove horse and donkey-pulled carts on roads for millennia before cars were invented. There were far fewer roads. The roads that existed were dirt tracks rather than fossil-fueled concrete and asphalt, and those roads had far fewer impacts, just like carts have far less impact than cars. Perhaps most important, human population was far, far lower, so the overall impact of the roads that existed before industrial civilization was correspondingly lower. The only conclusion a sane person can draw after reading Goldfarb's book is that zero new roads and dismantling existing roads is what we should be aiming for, along with a phase-out of cars and trucks. Anything else is unacceptable. In Cobalt Red, Kara writes, since about 1/4 of CO2 emissions are created by vehicles with internal combustion engines, the expansion of battery-powered transportation provides the only solution. Not only is this false, it displays a stunning lack of imagination on the part of Kara. Again, humans have been driving cars for only about 135 years, out of our 300,000-year existence on Earth. We've had cobalt-containing lithium-ion batteries for only about 40 years. This ecocidal way of life is so alluring, so pervasive, so addicting, that we, and Kara specifically, simply cannot see out of the prison it is holding us in. If we cannot even imagine a life without cars, without batteries, without technology, then we have absolutely no hope of stopping or even slowing the destruction of our only home. Cobalt Red is primarily about the desperation of artisanal miners, adults and children, in the DRC. It describes an industry that treats people as cogs in a machine and throws them away casually. The author quotes a local named Sammy, who lives near one of the cobalt mines. Imagine if a mining company came to the place where you live and they kick you out. They destroy all your belongings except whatever you can carry in your own hands. Then they build a mine because there are minerals in the ground, and they keep you out with soldiers. What can you do if there is no one to help you? They kicked us from our homes. We lived on that land for 3 generations before the mining companies came. We grew vegetables and caught fish. They threw us out, and now we cannot find enough food to feed our families. The book is secondarily about the devastating environmental impacts of mining. These impacts occur whether it is men in machines or children with pickaxes and rocks in their hands doing the mining. The end result is the same: land, air, water, and natural and human communities destroyed. The author writes, "A thick cloud of fumes, grit, and ash suffocates the land. Sky and earth meet vaguely above the hills at some obscure and unattainable frontier. Villages along the road are coated with airborne debris. Children scamper between huts like balls of dust. There are no flowers to be found, no birds in the sky, no placid streams, no pleasant breezes. The ornaments of nature are gone. All color seems pale and unformed. Only the fragments of life remain. This is Lualaba province, where cobalt is king." Mining for the materials to make everything from our gadgets to our cars, materials to make roads, to make plastic, materials to create the things we all take for granted every single day, is destroying the planet. The author notes, "We would not send the children of Cupertino to scrounge for cobalt in toxic pits, so why is it permissible to send the children of the Congo? Here in the US, we don't allow children to work in mines. But we do allow men driving massive mining machines to destroy the land that the families of nearby children have foraged on for generations, to create air pollution that nearby children will breathe, to stack or dam toxic tailings, contaminating the soil and water for eons, soil and water the children need to survive and grow up healthy. We allow mining companies to, quote-unquote, take golden eagles and pygmy rabbits and other endangered and threatened species, to destroy the homes of wild beings who are just trying to raise their own children on land that holds the same materials the children in the Congo mine with their bare hands." Kara concludes that if major technology companies, EV manufacturers, and mining companies acknowledged that artisanal miners were an integral part of their cobalt supply chains and treated them with equal humanity as any other employee, most everything that needs to be done to resolve the calamities currently afflicting artisanal mining would be done. Yes, helping the artisanal miners would be better than nothing. Stopping the child trafficking, the sexual assaults, the sickness, the injuries, the penury, and the deaths is critically important. But that won't stop the mining. That won't stop the pollution and environmental devastation that mining causes. The only conclusion a sane person can draw after reading Kara's book is that zero artisanal mining is what we should be aiming for. An especially perceptive, sane person reading his book will conclude that zero mining should be the real goal. Anything else really is unacceptable. The faulty premise behind all three of these books is that this ecocidal way of life can and should continue. This is false. It can't. It shouldn't. Ultimately, of course, it won't. Not only are these books connected by the stunning lack of understanding by their authors of the implications of their own work, they are also connected in that they describe just three of the many devastating implications of modern life. One can imagine 1,000 books just like these about every aspect of modern life we take for granted. All three of these books are well worth reading if you want to know the truth about what this ecocidal way of life is doing to us, to the natural world, to other people, and to the planet as a whole. Each of these books is absolutely devastating to read if you truly take in what they are saying and deeply understand what we have done and what we are doing right now. The perversion of all that is good in the world in service to industry and consumption will wreck you to your core if you let it, and I implore you to let it. Why? Because only if we truly understand the implications of the horrors these books describe will we be able to make change. Real change. Not the half measures, the compromises, the ineffectual so-called quote-unquote solutions suggested by the authors of these books, but major, life-altering change that is what we need to stop the slaughter of the planet. I will leave you with this last quote from Cobalt Red that says pretty much everything I've been trying to say in this essay. A lone girl stood atop a dome of dirt, hands on her hips, eyes cast long across the barren land where giant trees once ruled. Her gold and indigo sarong fluttered wildly in the wind as she surveyed the ruin of people and earth. Beyond the horizon, beyond all reason and morality, people from another world awoke and checked their smartphones. None of the artisanal miners I met in Campuchia had ever even seen one.